for educational purposes at Fincham & Associates moving forward. But here's a fantastic opportunity to really have an approachable understanding of what appraisers do, specifically Fincham & Associates, kind of the evolution of this brand and the various, say, niches or service verticals that go with appraising. It's a nuanced profession that can seem somewhat difficult to understand, but we have someone here who is very talented and skilled in Woody Fincham of making it approachable and digestible. I'd say this is a nuanced profession that's difficult to understand. Don't you think that's fair?
Very much so.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Yeah, the average Joe doesn't truly realize the significant influence of an appraiser in life in general. So if you have some questions, put them in the feed. We'll relay them live on air, and we'll spend an hour with a man that needs just very little introduction, and Woody Fincham. J-Dubs, we're in your hands. Hello, everyone. My name is Jerry Miller, and thank you kindly for joining us. I'm sitting across from Woody Fincham of Fincham & Associates. He is the president and co-founder of this fantastic company. And today we're going to spend about an hour getting to know Fincham & Associates and really personifying a brand that's making a positive impact here in Central Virginia and beyond. And we'll also spend time understanding what an appraiser does. What an appraiser does from an influence standpoint, from a valuation standpoint, and get a true feel for the different service verticals that Woody is operating within. First, hello, my friend. I'm glad that we get to spend an hour across from each other talking about a subject that is very, very important to you and something that you constantly read upon. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for letting me come up here and sort of get on the soapbox for a little while.
It's absolutely our pleasure. If you could put Fincham & Associates in perspective, give us the flip book of what happened here.
We're a specialty firm in the valuation space, which is another way of saying appraisal firm. We handle a lot of bespoke real estate, such as luxury estates, mansions, equestrian-related residential property, all over the Commonwealth. Started my career down in Hampton Roads, so we still are involved with the oceanfront and that type of property down there. Here in Central Virginia, we spend a lot of time with your normal everyday real estate. If you can call Charlottesville and the Albemarle area normal real estate, this is a very diverse market. When I first came here 10 years ago, I was surprised at how much wealth was here, and there's just some awesome property here. And so we handle that. We do some consulting work, feasibility analysis work. Spend a lot of time in the litigation support area. When folks are getting divorced, or in the case of a partition suit where heirs may be suing one another for control of a property or to make one sell the property. We spend a lot of time with that, and then other various litigation support stuff.
How does someone get into this business?
That's a good question, because our profession's going through an evolution right now where the folks that originally were credentialed in the early 90s are getting ready to retire, or they won't be with us anymore. And undergrads don't think about the appraisal profession. They might be aware of it because mom and dad got them a refinance, or they talked about the appraisal when they were purchasing a home, but it's not something that the undergrads even know about. Most people coming into our profession are oftentimes in second or even third careers. So it's not something that most people are aware of. I mean, there's a process to it, and it's very difficult to get into the business because it's still working under an old mercantile concept of an apprenticeship. It's something you don't see very often in modern professions, but you definitely have to serve under someone as a mentee, a mentor.
Put in perspective the evolution of what's happening and the opportunity ahead. Much like home inspectors, there is a significant changing of the guard as the older guard is aging out of the profession. I would imagine that's happening with appraisers.
Sure.
And the opportunity ahead for, say, someone like you that has decades in this business ahead of himself, and
Right.
the partner in your business, your son, who truly has decades ahead
Oh, sure.
with Fitcham and Associates. Just give us some insight into what's happening.
Yeah, my son's 28 years old, and he is, my father would say, would be in the catbird seat. And that, as this aging out happens and we have a changing of the guard, so to speak, he's got a lot of opportunity in front of him. I mean, I'm 46 this Friday, and I'm still young for the business. The median age in my business is 63 for residential SRA appraisers. SRA is a designation that the Appraisal Institute puts out. It's sort of like getting a master's degree in valuation. And at 63, that's really close to retirement age. So, we've got, there's going to be a tremendous amount of opportunity over the next several years, 5 to 10 years, I would say.
He talks SRA. This guy's got more letters after his name than any doctor I've ever met. He's got an SRA, an AI-RRS, an ASA, an RAA. He's a member of the RAC. This guy's got more credentials than anyone I know. What's going on over here at Woody Fincham?
Just alpha type personality. When I was getting in that was the one thing that I had a challenge with early in my career, is that I would show up at properties to do my walkthrough, and people are looking at me like, "Where's your boss? You're too young. You got too much hair. You don't have any white hair." That kind of thing. And I found out very early that credentials were an important thing. Particularly when I'm working with private clients for like attorneys and CPAs and those types of professionals. They see a value in having lots of credentials. And it's nice when I'm able to get qualified for a court appearance that, I've got these types of designations and things behind my name. And each one of them has a sort of a couple of them are kind of general designations, where the rest of them are specific to different types of valuation specialties.
So when it's all said and done, what is it that you do?
Well, essentially we appraise the value of property rights. That's the 20,000 foot level of what we do. Most people say, well, you're a house appraiser. No, I value the rights of residential use property. That's the majority of what I do. But we're not actually valuing the house. We're valuing the property itself and the rights therein.
And why is this so incredibly important in this home buying and selling process?
Well, for the mortgage side of it, our entire economy is propped up on what happens with the housing market. It's our biggest GDP by far, and there's a lot of lending that goes on with it. If you just look back 14, 15 years ago, when we had the time of great unpleasantness, as I hear the term often used, I don't think a lot of people realize how close we were to falling off of the edge. We were really close. And the entire world was going to be upset because of it. And a lot of that goes back to real estate and how the real estate's valued or not valued correctly. And unfortunately, there were a lot of weird and sometimes maybe even illegal things going on.
How does someone in your position maintain the knowledge to value real estate, hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars, when the market is changing so quickly?
Well, that's what we do. We study change, always. Our firm has been very particular about keeping up with technology as best that we can. It's a forever changing thing. Well, I also teach for the Appraisal Institute. That's also one of the things that I enjoy doing. And when I'm teaching and lecturing, oftentimes what I tell people is that if you're going to get in this business and you ever get to the point where you think you know everything, you need to quit. Because this is a lifelong learner profession. You're constantly evolving and changing, and you don't want to get too set in your ways about doing things any one particular way, which is a good reason. Having my son as my business partner, he loves to play gotcha with dad. Sometimes I get a little, I guess lazy is the right word. It's like, I don't want to look at another way of doing an analysis here. And he's a little techno nerd. He gets in there and it's like watching The Matrix or something. I know how my mentor must have felt now watching him, because he's so far ahead of me and what he's able to do on the technology side. And it's just really neat to see that. He's constantly helping me evolve, even though sometimes I don't want to.
Your wife actively involved in the business, your son actively
Yes.
involved in the business. What's that like? Family business, true and true.
It really is. And we have employees as well that are unrelated, but the core of the company is my wife, who's our office manager, bookkeeper, the glue that holds us together, basically. And my son is really our head researcher and analyst. and I'm sort of the quarterback. I do most of the inspecting and doing the final review, and I'm there to quarterback when they run into a complex situation. I'm usually the person coming in to sort of quarterback that through.
Now, one of the things that we've seen spring up with such a fast-moving market is an appraisal that's offered that's more of a efficient appraisal, a desktop appraisal that you guys are offering, where you're billing hourly to help folks understand what's going on. Give us some insight into that.
So sometimes folks need a restricted report. That's a technical term that we use in the business, but it's basically a light appraisal. I mean, the same amount of analysis goes into it, but the type of reporting that we do it's much less. And what we're utilizing that for is when someone needs to get an idea of, you can't use a restricted report for lending or anything like that. That won't meet the FIRREA requirements. It's some of the banking regulations FIRREA is. And it's not unusual for a developer or an investor to call us up and say, hey, we're going to purchase a piece of property. It's in this kind of condition. We're going to remodel it to this condition. What would be the benefit or cost benefit to us on that? And it's just a quicker way to do it.
He does a ton of appraisals that are not just mortgage lending related. He's touched on some, but if we could take a deeper dive now, perhaps starting with the tax service vertical.
Yeah, we've got several assignments right now that we're doing for gift tax, where someone's inherited property, and as of that date that they inherit, it's usually going to be the date of their father or mother passing away. They need a baseline value for tax purposes to find out what their tax responsibilities are going to be. So they have to have an appraiser come in and do that. We have one right now that's 16 pieces of property in one estate.
Wow,
very complex. Everything from a 300-acre conservation eased property to just vacant agricultural land and everything in between. We do that. We'll do retrospective valuations for that type of thing as well. CPAs oftentimes will hire us to do, because CPAs, when you hire them, they have their own way of depreciating real estate and how they value it. On paper, it's 80% right, but they don't get into the nuance of what we get into as an appraiser, because like anything, each profession has its little nuances that you have to deal with.
Now, when you're working for a family or a CPA firm of a portfolio holding of that magnitude, I understand every element and every circumstance is different.
Sure.
How does billing work?
We try to do hourly billing in those situations. Now, like in that particular case I'm talking about, we did actually end up discounting the rate a little bit because some of the properties
substantial.
Yeah. So some of the properties are very similar to one another. So the initial research that we would do for one piece is going to be an overlay to another piece that's similar to it. So we're able to cut some or have efficiencies there. We're not cutting any corners. We're still doing the diligence, but it doesn't require everything doesn't require original diligence. You're reusing some of it.
So for the folks that are curious, your services as it applies to anything court-related, litigation-related, if you could.
Right. So with anything that we're doing for litigation purposes, we have usually a set fee that we'll use for the report, and then anything after that, it's going to be on an hourly rate. If we're going to come in for deposition or we're going to come in for court testimony, that's going to be billed at an hourly rate.
That's fantastic. And you do a lot of that work?
We're picking up more and more of it. Fortunately for us as a business, but one of our colleagues, Karen Pape, here locally, Pape & Associates, she retired, and we've been getting a lot of overflow work from her previous clients because she's not doing much of anything anymore, and she's enjoying her retirement. I just spoke to her last week, and a big thank you to her because she's been good about referring us over, and we've had a good run with that. Other than that, I think there's Will Sanford in town at the appraisal group, and there's us, and there's other firms, but most of those firms are just focused strictly on mortgage work.
One of the elements of your line of work that I think is underrated from an appreciation standpoint is that initial conversation a realtor or a team of realtors may have with clients on where to list out of the gates.
Oh, yeah.
And we know how critically important the first list price is from setting a tone or an image for the market. Sometimes you guys have to come in and offer some clarity to the process. How so?
Oh, we do that quite often. As I've gotten better known here in the area, what I often will tell agents is if you've got a hard-headed seller, they're stuck on a price, maybe they know you because they've got a previous relationship with you, they may not listen to you as closely as they should as the professional that they're hiring. hire an appraiser to come in and do that. I mean, that's where I don't have any interest in the property other than doing the best work that I can. I mean, the only thing I can advocate for is the work product that I put out. I'm not advocating for what the listing agent wants to list it at. I'm not advocating for what the seller may want to sell it for. And we're there to help them come to common sense or some type of pragmatic way of looking at it. And we'll consult with them even after we publish the report to them and walk them through what we're doing, why we're doing it. And oftentimes, having that fresh perspective is a lifesaver for the agent, because the agents, if they're not careful, they can lose a client just common sense disagreements.
Very well said. Feasibility analysis are also a value proposition of working alongside Fincham and Associates. The value benefit of a remodel is a topic so many of us are having now. With inventory being so pinched, we're staying in our homes longer. As we stay in our homes longer, we consider making the homes more improved upon because we're living in them longer. Once we start shopping around the cost or the asking price of working with a remodeler, we realize how expensive updates to our houses are, in some cases many six figures. Before we get to that point, maybe a conversation with you at Fincham and Associates is the best path. Offer some perspective if you could.
We love to do that. That is something that I wish that more consumers would take advantage of, because, if you're thinking about doing a remodel of any significant level, you're right, it can get very expensive. A kitchen remodel in Glenmore can run you six figures easily.
Easily, yeah.
So, I mean, if you have recently purchased a property and you don't think you have a high amount of equity in the property, over improving it's very easy to do. That's putting more money into it than you can get back out of it if you were to sell it. So if you're getting ready to do a remodel, it's a good idea to look at what we call a feasibility analysis, where we'll value it as it sets right now, and then we'll take a look at the specifications of the work that you're going to do, like the type of remodel it's going to be. For the instance of a kitchen, what level of appliances are we putting in, what type of cabinets are we doing, are we changing the floor plan around, opening it up, or anything like that. We'll take a look at what the contributory value of that change would be, and that will give you an idea of what your return immediately would be on it. Oftentimes folks are going to over-approve, especially if they've just bought, if they're thinking about doing a lot of remodel, if they bought at market value, because sometimes the contributory value is not, it's not a dollar for dollar return immediately. But with real estate constantly cycling upwards over time, usually it catches up. But it just depends on the degree. So you may still want to over-improve, or what we call super adequacy, but in the end, what you're doing going into it. You're making that decision, you're doing it rather than just being surprised by it.
What are some of the best improvements possible for a return on investment? We're not talking quality of life. We understand that some improvements, some remodeling done is going to be done that may make someone happier in their house. And that undoubtedly has value. We're not trying to marginalize it. We're just talking strictly dollars and cents, return on investment.
Well, it depends on your situation. So the best way that I can put it is, like, if you're in a subdivision, say like Lake Monticello or Forest Lakes, the real estate's very homogeneous. Everything's very similar. I mean, there's, of course, differences, but whatever property class you fall in, you don't want to fall out of whatever's contemporaneous to the market at the time. So if everybody's going with, if you're doing a kitchen, getting ready to do a kitchen remodel, and everybody that you've looked at recently, like you've gone to some open houses, talked to some agents or whatever, and they're telling you, you got to go with this white tile, you got to do with the off-white marble and gray or whatever, it behooves you to go along that same realm, because then you're offering something that's competitive to what else is out there. Where it gets tricky is when folks, their personal taste is way different than what the market wants. And so you have to be very careful with that. When you get into the bespoke real estate, luxury real estate, that's a whole different ballgame. I mean, oftentimes we're talking about real estate where folks can write a check for really whatever they want, and they're not doing it for ROI or return on investment. They're doing it just because it's something that they want to do for their taste. And the difference in appraisal terms is, one, the example I just gave you is called value in use, or use value. It's a value specific to the person that's doing that, whereas market value is how would the overall market see it. So if you're in a property that competes in more of a market value area like Forest Lakes or like Monticello, it's best to kind of understand what the market taste is, so that you don't over or under improve in that general idea.
Let's talk ADUs.
Oh, accessory dwelling units. That is such a popular thing. I mean, with California they always lead on this this new stuff that comes into the market. But they're allowing multiple accessory dwelling units now in a lot of the areas out on the West Coast because they have an affordability issue. ADUs, we see a lot of them when you get out into the county. It's not uncommon for someone to have a detached garage with an apartment over it, and they may be renting it out to a graduate student or someone like that. And they definitely add value. Some markets they add a lot of value, and some they don't. I mean, when you get into the interior urban markets, it can be challenging because usually there's not a lot of space, and whatever they're going to build for the ADU is going to be kind of tiny, I guess is the right way to say it, and it may not meet the. Again, you're trying to keep up with what the taste of the market would be.
Do we think your services would be a good fit for determining if a unit should be converted into multi-unit or a single rental unit?
Oh, absolutely. Actually, my designation project to get my SRA, that's the case study that we did. I mean, it's a hypothetical case study, but it's using real estate data. It's in a university town, and it's close to the campus, and it's it's right now a single-family home, but could be converted into a 4-unit. And that's definitely something that we're really familiar with.
So we're giving you a snapshot of how Woody is offering service value proposition for stuff besides just mortgage lending. What we'd love to do is offer some clarity of how his intellect and expertise is applied to, say, Central Virginia, Albemarle County, Charlottesville City. I believe we have some slides that we can highlight.
Oh yeah,
on today's show.
Yeah, I sent Judah over some slides, just kind of showcasing some of the statistical trending work that we do. I mean, it's actually pretty simple stuff to do, and we've got several different software products that we use for it.
Before we highlight the data, one important element here is the sophistication of your workflow, output, and presentation. Mm-hmm. What I'm seeing from you that I may not be seeing from others is a commitment to innovative software for presentation purposes. Can you put in perspective of how you may be doing that differently than some of your colleagues?
So the majority of the appraisers out there, particularly mortgage lending appraisers, and I'm not picking on them, there's nothing wrong with what they're doing. They're fulfilling a service, and God bless them for doing it. But they're filling out a form most of the time. They're doing their work inside of the form. We use things like Word and Excel. I've got several proprietary programs that we utilize. I built several spreadsheets with my son that we're really getting in. We're doing all of our development of our report inside of those elements and then transferring it over to our reports. Whereas a lot of appraisal firms, it's usually a one person involved. I have a team involved. I mean, there's at least 4 to 5 people touching every file that I do from the analysis perspective. But that doesn't even count our office staff when they're doing order entry and logistics for that. But I've got a couple of researchers looking at it, I've got an analyst looking at it, and I've got someone reviewing it at minimum. And so that's 4 different things right there. And we spend a lot of time. I mean, human capital to me is just as important as the technology end of it, but our human capital is very well trained. I personally have trained them, and my son's personally trained everybody who works in our firm. So when they're looking at data, they're looking at it the way I want to look at it. Because my son, coming up as an appraiser's kid, he started doing data entry with me probably when he was 15 or 16, and just for some fun money. And as he got more involved with it, he realized how important it was for Dad's data to look exactly like Dad wants it to look, because Dad otherwise has a short circuit.
Woody Fincham, do you often find, and we have to navigate this dance carefully,
Sure,
but do you often find mistakes, if you may, in colleagues or competitors' reports that you then can offer clarity, correction, or confidence for whoever is paying for this report, saying, maybe look at it this way?
Yeah, we were recently hired by a previous client that we had actually worked with a couple of times. This is just one example, but they had an appraiser come over from another market and that wasn't familiar with it. It's a lot inside of the city of Charlottesville. It's a very complex situation because it's more than an acre in Charlottesville. Valuable piece of land, right? This person came over and didn't do a very good job with it, we'll say, and just fundamental errors in it. And we were hired by that consumer to come in and review it. One of the designations behind my name, the AIRRS, That's a review appraisal designation. And what a review appraiser does is we are hired to review the quality and reliability and or credibility of the report that's under review. And we often do that for mortgage companies because mortgage companies are required to do that, but we also do it for litigation purposes and now consumers. With the appraisal gap things that are going on the market, sometimes the lenders and their agents, which are called appraisal management companies, they hire the cheapest appraiser that they can. And oftentimes it's not even a local person. They're hiring someone from really far away that are driving in, and they charge less than anybody here locally charges, which all of us locally are going, how's
that possible?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But they're cutting corners to do it. And then they may not necessarily be competent in the market because real estate is very local.
Sure.
If you don't understand residential at the local level, then you're probably doing a disservice to your client. But in August, when the rates went up, a lot of appraisers are struggling to get work because they're relying on mortgage work only, and so they're willing to go further and further out to do it. So it's very possible that you're in a situation where you may have an appraisal that wasn't done well, and that's where that review appraiser comes in. I mean, we do that for consumers. We do it for attorneys in litigation. I've been hired in litigation situations where we didn't value for either side of the case. We were hired by one side to come in. I need to know the strengths and weaknesses of this report, and I need to know the strengths and weaknesses of the other side's reports, and then we consult with them on that, and it helps them actually do better examinations and cross-examinations when they're in trial.
You and I have had conversations off air of how you think the profession should evolve or improve in a number of ways.
Yeah.
What are some of the issues you may be seeing in the appraisal profession?
I mean, understanding, that lifelong learner thing that I mentioned earlier, I think it's super important that appraisers are constantly evolving and getting better. There's always new tools available. There's always new ways of doing things. I mean, if you're still doing the same thing you were doing 20 years ago the same way, that should be a problem. I mean, one of the things that I hate to do is I'll go look at one of my reports from a year ago, and I'll read it and go, what were you thinking, Fincham? I mean, I knew what I was doing at the time, but as I've gotten away from it and I'm no longer thinking about it, I'm going back and going, I could have done this better, I could have done that better. And I think every appraiser needs to be that way. I mean, it's on top of just being good at your job and professional at your job, I mean, it's a highly litigious thing too. I mean, the E&O companies that sponsor our insurance can be rather...
Put that in perspective.
I mean, you can get sued. I mean, you do something that you're not supposed to do, or you fumble the ball, so to speak, you can be sued for it. And, right now is not a high litigation period in the appraisal profession for that reason, because everything's appreciating. But as the markets are starting to taper and normalize now, you're going to start seeing more and more litigation happen from appraisers, perhaps doing things they shouldn't have been doing.
How about appraisal bias?
Oh my gosh, that's a big topic.
General terms first.
Well, so appraisal bias is something that's become very well known in the last couple of years in the media. It's become a thing where some minority consumers have claimed that the appraiser doing their appraisal was somehow biased because of their minority status. And there's been several well-publicized civil suits that evolved because of it. One of the big cases out in Marin County, California, just settled. Because it was just detrimental to the appraiser's business. No one has seen the report, so we don't know, who was right or who was wrong in those situations. But it's been a big thing. It's such a big thing that the Biden administration now has what's called the PAVE project, and they are actually a task force that involves people like the head of FHA. I can't ever say it right. FHFA, HUD. Fannie and Freddie are involved with it. Several different nonprofits involved with racism and bias and things like that are all part of this, and they are trying to figure out how to make sure that there's not bias going on in the appraisal side of things.
Well, how would the bias work? How would it?
Well, so like as an example, the one in Marin County, it was a couple that. The first appraiser came out, and that appraiser apparently valued it lower than they thought it should be valued, and they were claiming that it's because they were African American. And then they had another appraiser come out, but they termed it as whitewashing the property. They basically erased all indications as the appraiser would walk through that there was an African American family living there, and they had one of their Caucasian friends meet with the appraiser, the second appraiser who came out. That report mysteriously came back way higher than the other one.
Wow.
So just on the face value of what was presented, that was bias.
Yeah.
Now, whether one was biased or the other was biased, I can't say because, again, no one's really seen it. I mean, we at the Appraisal Institute, where I'm a member, we've begged for to see it. Let us come in and do forensic work on it and figure out, well, who's right or who's wrong here. And but no one knows.
That's why I would think all these credentials following your name are so critically important, because the credentials come with a measure of accountability. You've had to go through these life experiences, these training seminars, and jump over these hurdles before you earn these credentials.
Right.
How is having these certifications, credentials, and being member of, say, RAC, something that we should prioritize more to help potentially offset one of the concerns we have, like appraisal bias?
Well, a designated appraiser has done extra things to earn it. So let's just jump into the SRA for a second. That was the first designation I ever got, and it's the most prestigious residential designation you can get. It required me to take additional education beyond the minimum to get your license. One of the things that I had to do is do what's called a demonstration report. It's like a capstone project for your master's. You spend a whole semester basically writing up your capstone, and you do your project and research. It's usually original research. So I do a demonstration report that's then graded by a grading committee that's already designated and well respected in the profession. And if I don't write a good enough report, they fail it. I get to rewrite up to a point if I need to. But then there's also what's called the experience review. And the experience review is where I'm actually an experience reviewer for the AI now, the Appraisal Institute. And when someone's going to get designated, they submit, it's supposed to be 1,500 hours worth of work.
Wow.
So I'll get a roster from one of the candidates that's got 500 hours of that, and I pick out of that what I want to. So I look at, do they have one on here that took a really long time for them to do? Like, instead of 8 hours, which is typical, do they do 20 hours? Or is it an atypical property type? And that's where you want to, as a screener, I'll go in and grab those, and then I go through it and look at their processes and interview them about what they did. And I had to go through all of that. And so you're getting interviewed, you get by peers, you're doing your project, and then you're doing the additional classes. And again, like I said earlier, it's almost like getting your master's, because it takes you a year and a half, 2 years to be able to get through that process. The other designations that I have, like you mentioned, RAC, that's a specific type of specialization for relocation appraising. What that's for is when a corporation's going to move a manager from one area to the other, the relo company will come in and they will guarantee to sell that property, whatever the appraisal may have been done at. And we're not actually doing market value there. What we're doing is forecasting the sales price. What should this sell for? Now, in the market like we're in right now in Charlottesville, if you put it on the market today, it's gone tomorrow. There's not a real need for that right now. But when you get back to a normal market, the relocation company wants to know, well, how long are we going to hold this property, and what's going to be our best sales price for this? Because they don't want to take something on that takes them 4 months or 5-6 months to sell. So they'll tell us, we want you to do this it has to sell within 90 days. What would be the price? And that's usually when listing prices are higher than the sales price. So, if say they start at $500,000 and we say the forecasted is $460,000, they may just go ahead and throw it on the market at $460,000, so that way they can liquidate it or dispossess the property as quickly as they can.
How do we drum up or influence more folks getting in the profession?
We're trying to figure that out. I mean, there's a lot of people way smarter than I am trying to figure that out, and
because it seems to be an awareness problem.
It is. It really
folks
is.
don't realize this legitimate profession that can pay extremely well.
Yes.
That has not tremendous amount of competition within it. And the competition that does exist within it is dying off or retiring. They don't realize these elements.
Yeah. Well,
is that fair?
Yeah, it's right on point. So how many real estate agents are there?
A ton.
Like 1.5 million?
Right. More than we can count.
So there's less than 75,000 appraisers right now. Maybe 40,000 of them are in the residential space. There's just not enough, really. There's not a shortage of appraisers by any means right now, but with that brain drain getting ready to happen with aging out, I think we're going to see that. So it's a great place for people to get into. If you're interested in real estate or development or finance of any level, but you don't want to get into sales or something like that, because I respect what salespeople do. I think that it's a very hard job. I can't do it. I tried to do it when I was an appraiser back in Virginia Beach, but I'm just not a salesperson. I'm not oriented that way. I like looking at data. I like crunching numbers. If you're that kind of person, this is a great job. And if you like to be outside a little bit, you like to be inside a little bit, great job for that. And you get to meet all kinds of people doing this. I mean, I've seen things that I won't talk about, and I've seen things that I love to talk about when I meet people and see their homes. I mean, you see every level of the human experience in what I do.
I love this guy. How about today's market in Central Virginia?
It's a strong one. We're coming out of a lull over the winter, I think, and getting ready to head into that heavy spring market. I think once schools, getting ready to let out, we're going to see a stronger market this year. As far as value goes, volume's going to be down because I think most people that wanted to move, have done it. Now we're getting back to a normal market where it's people that have to move for one reason or another.
We have one of our favorite things that we can do now. It's showcasing data. Woody Fincham has some slides that we can put on screen. We will follow your lead, Woody. I love the slides. I love the data. You are leading the show here.
Sure. I mean, Judy, you can throw whichever one you want. And these I didn't bring these in to just talk specifically about the data in the chart.
Slide 1 is up.
And sorry, I'm following you on the screen here to see what we're looking at.
That's the past 12 months median price per square foot Albemarle County slide.
So, when I was running this data over the weekend to just take a look at what was going on in the market as a whole, and this, just to talk a little bit about the data here, it is showing that there is a negative price per square foot in Albemarle over the course of the last year. But this is the type of analysis that a good appraiser is going to want to be doing. I mean, most of our competitors on the mortgage side, they're probably writing 20-page reports. We're doing 40, 50, 60 pages because we're including our exhibits, we're discussing it, we're supporting whatever we're saying. I mean, we run charts like this to compare differences between properties. Like if I'm looking at properties that are Pearl certified versus properties that aren't, I might do a group data paired sales analysis where we can show on a chart this is where these properties are performing and this is where these properties are performing to support the adjustment that we're going to do. So I mean, we spent a lot of time on that, and I say a lot of time. It's a lot of time that started up, but once you start doing it in your daily work, it becomes just a normal thing. I mean, we put a lot of effort in what we do, and I hear from underwriters all the time on the mortgage side, why are you putting all this crap in your report? And it's like, well, technically I'm supposed to, number one, and then they'll be like, well, nobody else does it. I was like, well, we're just doing our job as best that we can.
I love it. Pearl certification is a moniker I hear often. It's a measure of efficiency, a home's output.
Right.
A certified home is going to be more valuable because the overhead moving forward is perhaps diminished or more kept in check. Can you put Pearl certified in perspective?
So another way to look at it is that if you've got a high efficient home that doesn't use as much energy, so your carrying costs for utilities are lower. That savings is actually income to you because your property is performing better in that regard. So it's not costing the consumer as much to have that home, and so it's putting more money in their pocket or saving more money to put in their pocket. Pearl was actually one of my best jobs last year. We actually got hired by them to go into the Charlottesville market and do a white paper study where we were looking at, well, what's the on average premium that this type of certification may have on a home. And we did a good job for them. They asked me to then quarterback 3 other cities where we looked at Boston, we looked at Phoenix, and we looked at Ann Arbor, Michigan. And we hired appraisers in those markets to come in and do the analysis. And then we took all that information and just wrote I'm just going to be unashamed and say a killer paper. And it was a project that took us about 6 months to do. And
6 months, wow.
It was it was very cool. I mean, and next week I get to go to Seattle and present it to a building performance association. So it's one of those jobs that I think that's going to last for a little while.
You like the education piece?
Oh,
the presentation piece? Why?
I love it. Well, litigation is really where we make most of our money, and that I enjoy talking about what I do. I like explaining it because when you're hired to do expert witness stuff, you're not there to show off how intelligent you are. You're there to explain and educate the jury or the judge. This is what I did. This is how I did it. This is why we're doing what we're doing. And being on the education side of it, because again, I do teach appraisers that are getting into the profession and also doing continuing education. I just enjoy talking about it because it actually makes me better at what I'm doing. Oftentimes when I have a class of continuing education, I always thank them for letting me be there because I'm learning a lot from them. They don't realize how much I actually learn from them because you're teaching people however they learn, and that's invaluable when you're in a witness box.
I can relate with hosting the shows we do. I mean, sitting across from you here for 44 minutes has been a blessing for us. How about slides and data? Because I see it's resonating with the folks. What's the next slide you want to highlight, Woody?
We can jump over to what's our next one here, Judah?
Number 2.
And what's the header for number 2, Judah?
Med DOM actives.
So that would be the median days on market for actives. This is again where we're looking at the supply that's going on in the market. The most important 2 things that you do in an appraisal report when you're doing market value is the market analysis aspect of it, and then the highest and best use aspect of it. Market analysis is we're talking about supply and demand. How is the property interacting out there? I mean, is the supply really low? Is it really high? And depending on how quickly these properties are absorbing into the market, or how fast someone's buying them. Like right now, there's a frenzy going on in Charlottesville. I mean, things are on the market one day, they're gone the next. And so everything's selling at a premium because there's not much supply. But that's the essence of a good appraisal report, is that we're looking at market analysis, and then that market analysis informs what's called the highest and best use analysis. That, I'm not getting too nerdy here, but what that is we're looking at the property. If it's an improved property, we're going to look at it and go, okay, if this was a vacant piece of land, what would the most likely consumer do with it? Would they build a home here? Would they convert it to a non-residential use? Can they do that? So we're looking at 4 things with that: what's legally permissible under zoning, what's physically possible depending on the shape of the lot, the size of the lot, then what's financially feasible, and then what's maximally productive to the lot. And then we also look at it, if it's already improved, as what's sitting here. Does it add more value to the land than just the land value? And if it does, the highest and best use is the current use. But we look at that, and that informs what the rest of the appraisal report's going to do. We spend pages on that in our reports. Most of our colleagues are checking a box on a form, and they're not explaining it. Even though they're required to do it, they don't. And that's the most common issue we see in other folks' reports.
Do we have, you get this all the time here, we have insanity when it's buying and selling locally. We heard earlier today about a couple with a young child buying a house without touring it in person, no home inspection, only did a virtual tour, $75,000 appraisal gap, 100-year-old home. I mean, is this a healthy market?
I give a lot of pause to those situations because, if it were me, I don't know that I'd want to buy in that situation. You're putting a lot out there that's just hanging there, and there's a great potential of someone taking advantage of you. And maybe not even knowingly taking advantage of you. You just end up in a situation where you should have known better. I often wonder why folks don't just go ahead and do the home inspection and get the appraisal, because they waive appraisals now too for the same reason. Just go ahead and get them. You may not be able to renegotiate or get out of your contract, but at least walking into it what you're getting yourself into, and you're not surprised later on. Whether or not you can use it for negotiation, that's a different conversation than if it's just for your own knowledge.
So healthy? To
No.
be determined?
I don't think it's healthy.
Yeah?
I don't think.
Does
and
it stabilize?
It
Or does
will.
this continue to be, how would you characterize the market? Unpredictable?
Well, there's
Volatile?
there's more buyers than sellers right now. So, and such a finite amount of real estate available that that's what people are having to do to be competitive. So it's healthy for them in the sense that they're getting a home, but it's unhealthy for them in the sense that there are going to be a percentage of those folks that are going to get themselves into a bad situation.
And is that bad situation underwater 12 months from now, or is it bad situation not knowing what's under the hood of the house or the value of the home when they bought?
One of my litigation colleagues down in Florida made me aware of a situation where they got hired to come in. Property was bought sight unseen. They did a video tour of it. Now, this is Florida, very humid. The property had black mold in it. It had been concealed. it doesn't matter who's right or wrong in that situation. Now you're dealing with a situation where you can't live in the home. It's got to be remediated. It's going to cost a lot of money to fix it. And whether you're wealthy or not wealthy, that's a tremendous amount of drain on your pocketbook. Now, that's one story out of many where that doesn't happen, but you never know when it's going to be you.
When's the market start seeing an uptick in inventory, and how does it play out by year end?
It'll start turning back to what we call a normal market, meaning that there'll be ample supply. Ample supply means that the properties are not as competitive. That when buyers have more alternatives, they can choose and pick what they want. Like another example in the market right now, if you've got a property that's in rather unupdated status, it's average or less, you're not seeing much of a difference between what people are willing to pay for that versus one that's been completely remodeled. In a normal market, the premium would always go to the property that's been remodeled recently. But right now, there's such a shortage of supply that folks are going, you know what? If we want to buy a house, we got to buy this one. And the situation you're mentioning, I mean, they're not bidding on what they want. It's not the perfect match for them, but that's what their choice. You sort of get backed into it.
There it is. The sales to list price ratio slide intrigues me. Judah's got it on screen. Walk us through what we're seeing. That's sales to list price. That's the header. It's got 0.3% up top with a red line next to it. The show is yours on that one. Sales to list price.
So what sales to list price shows is that what is a property listed at, and then what does it sell for? Right now, and in the last couple of years, the list price actually will be less than what they actually sell it for. The buyers end up bidding it up, or they just offer more money than the listing. And that's a metric that we'll look at when we're doing analysis to show that this is definitely a seller's market, because the seller can pretty much charge whatever they want to for it within reason. When that starts to dip below 100%, meaning that if 100% would be if it's put on the market for $500,000 and it sells for $500,000, that's one. It's 100%. Once it dips down into the 97, 96, 95% ratios, that shows that that the buyers are able to buy at less than list price, and the more that occurs, the more it shows that we're back to a buyer's market then.
That's good data right there. DOMs sold, days on market sold. This slide, walk us through what we're seeing.
So days on market sold is basically just showing you what the up to the effective date of the analysis would be, what's been going on as far as how long the properties that have sold and have been absorbed is another term that we use into the market. How long do they sit on the market? And the shorter that is, usually it indicates the higher the competition level.
Do you see this market turning to buyer anytime soon? Or is it strictly we don't have enough inventory, the land's too expensive, the labor's too expensive, the cost of goods are too expensive, we're staying in a seller's market for perpetuity?
Well, for right now, I don't think we're moving out of it being a seller's market. I mean, honestly, it would almost require something strong on the economic front to change it. I don't see Charlottesville changing anytime soon. The tertiary and secondary markets like Buckingham and some parts of Goochland and Powhatan, I think you're going to start seeing, as it normalizes back, those will be the markets that do it first, because
they're far from jobs.
They're far from jobs, yeah.
Yeah. So you're seeing far from epicenter of employment softening first. Mm-hmm. Closest you are to the epicenter, the more value protection you have.
Yeah, I mean, people want to be as close to work as they can, or to their lifestyle center. Most people, there's a premium for downtown Charlottesville because it's close to everything. And if you want to be in Ivy or someplace like that, you're really close to the town, and you can have a pretty good lifestyle there. But if you've got to drive your kids an hour to go to soccer practice or something like that, it requires a lot of resource.
We have had so much valuable conversation on residential. You're a commercial expert as well. There's been
becoming one,
and this is a humble statement from a guy that knows the business inside and out. There's been a lot of doom and gloom with commercial.
Yeah.
Do you buy in that?
Yeah, I do.
You do buy it.
So I have an MAI designated appraiser that's a really good colleague and friend, Heather Placer. She's out of the Richmond market, but works all of Virginia basically. And she's been assisting me getting my experience hours so I can earn my commercial credential. And I'm really close to doing that. But yeah, I mean, you're seeing a lot of. But the apartment market is overbuilt in a lot of areas. Retail, I mean, with everything that's going on with the .com stuff with Amazon, I mean, retail is becoming a ghost town. It's just there's too much of it, and the market has shifted. And until there's a return back to office space and things like that, which a lot of CEOs are pushing for now, that should improve some on that side. But there's just commercial's not doing as well as it has been. I mean, they're definitely exhibiting a lot of fractures.
You said, 75,000 appraisers in America. Mm-hmm. How many specialize in commercial?
Somewhere around the 30,000 or so. It's less than half.
That only do commercial?
Well, a lot.
Can anyone do that? And do you have to be in a major market to be an only commercial appraiser?
Well, it's a depend situation. So a lot of commercial designated appraisers they might do ag work, like poultry houses and farms and things like that. That's an industry unto itself. Very hard to do, as a matter of fact. When you get into...
Why is that? Because there's no comps?
Well,
comps are hard?
And you're oftentimes with a farm, you're dealing with a going concern, so there's a business element to it. Like a poultry house, the farmers don't even own the chickens. They're owned by Purdue or whomever may own them, that. and they grow.
I didn't know that at all.
There's a documentary on it. I'll tell you later, but you need to watch it. Okay. It'll turn your head around.
So how the hell does excuse my language? How the heck does an appraiser appraise farms where there's no comps and it's difficult to understand who owns the assets and the value those assets produce? Good gosh. That's challenging.
I can talk about it in concept because it's not something that I've done. I've helped on a couple poultry appraisals, but it's not something that
This is fascinating.
By any means am I an expert at. But they use all three approaches to value. There's income, cost, and sales. So believe it or not, there's actually comps for stuff like that. Augusta, I think, is the fourth largest poultry market in the country. They do turkeys and chickens. And you can find sales, but then you also look at cost. You're looking at because those operations require very sophisticated technology. A lot of times farmers go out of business because they don't keep their tech up. And so the integrators that Purdue and those companies, they don't want their chickens there because they need their product to be healthy. And so you look at cost, what's it going to cost to build it, depreciation, all that goes into it, and then income, how much are you producing it from the income side of things because of the land. And it's really no different than doing retail. It's just it's different because it's not retail.
It's fascinating. You're doing a lot of the same stuff that a business broker would do.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Can you offer some perspective into that?
So Heather, who I mentioned earlier, she actually does some BV as well. She's really good at doing short-term rental valuations. I mean, because short-term,
BV, business valuations?
Yeah, well, so short-term rentals have a BV component to them. Now, she's a real estate appraiser first and foremost, but when you get involved with like hotels or short-term rentals, both of those two things are very similar, actually. You've got an operation where you've got expenses where you're dealing with, laundry for the towels and your maids and all the different things that go into it. So yes, there's an intangible business value that has to be valued in that as well.
This is fascinating.
It can get very complex.
Yeah, this is very complex. This is fascinating. How about this question for this market? And you get this question at every party you go to, every concert you go to.
Oh yeah.
People stop you on the mall here. What's the market going to do? Where's the market headed? What's going to happen? How do you answer that?
Well, generally, if I'm at a party, I don't tell people what I do.
Because you don't want this question, right?
Yeah, I mean, if I give you an opinion, I'm giving you an appraisal. So I have to be very careful of that. I'm happy to work for anyone as long as I'm not related to you. I don't work for family because there'd be a conflict of interest there. But I avoid those conversations as best that I can. I can talk about things in general, but I can't talk about things that are specific because at that point I've taken an assignment and then I'm legally responsible for whatever I tell you at that point.
So you play it safe.
I try to.
That's a smart man.
Yeah.
What are we missing, Woody Fincham, that needs to be highlighted?
Oh gosh, we've talked about so much today.
It's been a breeze.
We are. One thing I'll say about our firm, we really love what we do.
I can tell.
We've been doing. I'm into my second decade, well into my second decade doing this, and hopefully I got a couple more decades under my belt. I got a grandson coming along that I think is going to make a great appraiser. My daughter-in-law is probably rolling her eyes right now.
Because his grandson is 5, 4?
He's 2.
Oh, he's 2. Okay.
He just turned 2.
Dude, no pressure. He's a hell of a soccer player, too.
Yeah, he likes the soccer balls. But I really believe in what we do. I mean, a lot of my colleagues and peers across the country are very kind of doom and gloom right now, but a lot of them are really involved with mortgage work. That's been their major revenue generator, and unfortunately, that's kind of dried up. And it's a cyclical thing. It happens every few years. But we've tried to look to the future and go, you know what, we can't just do this. We need to do these other things too. And it's made us better at what we do. I mean, we're very comfortable walking into a complex situation where, like one of the litigation assignments I've got right now, we had to do 5 different values on this one piece of property because of the different scenarios that they're running through with it. And, it can be quite difficult, that requires a commitment to education, to evolving, and just, wanting to do the best job that you can. So I'm lucky. And a quick shout out to my team. I've got my son, who I can't say enough positive things about. My wife, again, Lori, she does such a great job. And then we've got Ashley. Ashley is our head researcher. Doesn't want to be an appraiser, but could be an appraiser tomorrow if she wanted to be. She writes great reports and she understands it well. And we've got my brother, of all people, is actually one of my trainees. He's 20 years older than I am. Contractor, just wanted to get out of. He's physically not wanting to be in that business anymore. I guess over time you get sore more. But he's becoming an appraiser, and I think we'll be pretty good at the job. And then we've got a new hire, Tyler, that we just brought on. And of course, the last guy I'll mention is Clay. He's one of our staff appraisers. He's a certified residential down in Roanoke, so he's working Roanoke, Smith Mountain Lake, that area.
You guys are impressive. Your footprint that you cover, service footprint.
Oh, it's huge. Again, when we get into mansion and bespoke work, luxury estates, we'll go anywhere in the Commonwealth, just about. I mean, we've done stuff along the Potomac River, Loudoun County, stuff along the ocean front in Virginia Beach, that area. We're kind of like Mikey, if you remember Mikey from Life Cereal.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he'll eat anything. That's sort of how we are,
That's the first Mikey reference on the show ever. That was a good one. I love it.
One of my mentors, he told me many years ago, is like, you want to work for people that want to work for you, not people that have to work for you. And the mortgage companies, they have to work with you. They're required by regulation to do it. So they see you as a hoop to jump through. Whereas when you're dealing with litigation or CPA or something like that, they want to work with you because they're trying to help their client as best that they can, and that they want someone to do that. So we've been pretty good about picking that up. And the Keswick Hunt, a lot of those houses through there are very difficult to appraise. I mean, one of the
behind the gates.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Well, we did Castle Hill a few years ago, which is like one of my feathers in my hat. As far as
Castle Hill, for those who don't know, is a massive cidery that's on a massive estate in Keswick.
Well, actually, this is adjacent to that. This is the original Castle Hill estate that I think it's Thomas Jefferson's godfather owned.
Okay.
There's actually a journal entry in Jefferson's, one of his journals, where he played the fiddle and Madison danced to his fiddle playing.
Oh,
so, and just cool to me that we have that kind of history here. But I mean, that was an extremely complicated property to appraise because it's not too far removed from the King's Grant when it was originally given by the King. Way back when. So, I mean, when we were doing deed research on it, you go back and there's this, the deeds are handwritten in this flowing script like you'd see on the Declaration of Independence or something. It's really cool. But we really enjoy doing that kind of work.
I think you may have just answered my last question, which is the most difficult one, and I kind of mean this tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah.
Of all the spots, commercial and residential, multifamily, single-family rental, whatever it may be, of all the real estate you've ever seen, what's the coolest and why?
When I became the assistant assessor here in Albemarle 10 years ago, I got to help do Monticello.
Get out.
Now, Monticello is what we call a non-tax parcel, but it has to be updated every year. So I got to go do the tour, get to see behind the scenes a little bit. And I wanted to be a history teacher growing up, so until I realized that you make no money doing that. But, in the time that we've been here, we've done Green Springs and Louisa, another King's Grant. That was the Morris who financed our side of the Revolutionary War, owned that property. Monticello, Castle Hill, and there's several others that by NDA I can't mention, but I've seen some pretty cool stuff. And that's really cool. Actually, I have a photography hobby, and I call it pictures from the right of way, because when I'm on property, I'll get permission from the landowner. It's okay if I take some photos from my collection, and I'll post them on social media sometimes. And it's just views that no one else will ever get to see unless they're on that property, and it's really cool.
That's awesome.
Really cool.
You would have made a heck of a history teacher.
Yeah.
He has the gift of taking complicated things and making them digestible and easy to understand.
Well, I appreciate that.
And I think we just did that on his show here. This was a breeze, man.
Yeah.
It was an absolute breeze.
You made it easy.
Where can we find folks? Where can we connect with you to work with your folks moving forward?
The easiest way to find us, believe it or not, is just Woody Appraiser Google. I mean, you can find us really easy there. If you can remember how to spell my name, the main website for the company is woodyfincham.com.
Okay.
We have I'm trying to remember all the different places we show up. We have a blog on WordPress called Valuation Nation. That's more of an insider thing for people who want to keep up with the appraisal side of things. But there's some good consumer information there as well. But that's the main ways to get us.
I love it. Thank you kindly.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Woody Fincham, guys. Fincham and Associates, co-founder and president of just a fantastic locally owned firm. He is just a trustworthy guy and someone you can count on. Same for his team and his family. Judah Wickhauer is the man behind the scenes that keep us on air. And this is some clarity and insight into what Fincham and Associates does on a day-to-day basis. My name is Jerry Miller for Woody Fincham. Thank you kindly for joining us.
Thanks.